crafty friends, it's Donna here, and for today's card, I've returned to my first love, which is colouring flowers. I'm going to use watercolour paper, which I'm just cutting off the block and slicing down to size. The stamp today is Paper Rose's Modern Poppies, which is a beautiful bouquet. I'm using watercolour paper, which is a little bit rough textured, and so I'm going to use my Misty stamping tool just in case I don't get a really good impression the first time. I'm stamping with Versamark ink, which is a clear sticky ink. And so that I don't get any extra powder sticking anywhere, I'm going to first prep the page with my powder tool, but not much powder comes out of this, and so in the more is more philosophy, that is me, I take the lid off and shake a little bit of powder onto the paper before spreading it around. And once I've stamped that a few times and got a good impression, I'm going to sprinkle on some white embossing powder and heat set that. I've only showed you stamping it once, but I actually lifted the lid and re-stamped the image about 3 times. Often when I'm watercolouring, I'll tape my paper down to the board, especially if I'm doing a big background like this one. But this watercolour paper is beautiful and thick, and it actually stood up to the amount of water that I put on it quite well. The other thing about the Fabriano Artistico paper is that it is very white compared to many watercolour papers, and so it doesn't muck with the colours, especially if you're going for a nice bright look like I am today. So the first thing I'm going to do is use a nice full brush and add a bunch of water to my paper. Then I'm dropping in some paint and spreading it a little bit, but then letting it do its thing after that. My paint today is actually an Ultra New colour out of a watercolour marker, and the colour is Moss. I've just squeezed a little bit onto a stamp block so that I've got some there to work with. While my background panel is drying, I'm going to use that same moss green to paint the leaves on my Modern Poppies bouquet. And I'm keeping the background panel near me on the desk. And as it dries, I'm spattering in more paint. The drier the panel gets, the less the paint will spread. And so in the end, I end up with some dots that have almost faded into the background and others that are standing out quite clearly. You'll see me do that 2 or 3 times over the course of painting the image. Once I finished with the leaves, it was time to get on to painting the flower petals. Once again, I'm using the Ultra New watercolour brush markers. I'm using Rubelite for the main part of the petal, and I'm dropping in full colour in the centre of the petal before working it out towards the edges with water. Then on the very edge of each petal, I'm dropping in just a few little drops of ruby red and letting those spread back from the outside of the flower. I won't show you the whole thing because the process for every petal was exactly the same. This panel didn't take nearly as long to dry as the green panel because I've only used a little bit of water. Once I've finished painting the bouquet, it's just a matter of cutting it out with my scissors, and what I've done is I've left a little border around the outside so that I don't have any delicate stems that could possibly break. I initially cut out a basic outline shape And then later I went in and made decisions about how much of the middle I wanted to cut out. Now that everything's dry, I'm going to cut out my background panel using a stitched rectangle die. This particular die is set up for the US sizings, and it will cut up to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I'm using the second one in, but if you prefer, they're also available in Australian sizes. Finally, it's just a matter of laying everything together. I've stuck my panel down directly to my card, but popped the flowers up with foam tape. The sentiment comes from the same stamp set, and I've just stamped that with VersaFine Onyx Black ink in the lower corner. If you've enjoyed this video, please press the thumbs up to let me know, and if you'd like to see more, please subscribe. Stay safe, everybody.